So you're part of their belief system, and those are close, trusted client relationships that every firm says they're chasing. But are you? And are you making it more possible to chase those or less? Are you creating a situation where you're selling the best? Or are you motivating lawyers to offer something that is not as good as it should be? Are you effectively trading your way out of access to that sweet spot? That's what my paper's about. Be careful if the obsession with how you run your own business becomes the way you do business, because then you've stopped thinking about the client and you're going to trade your way out of their mind.
Welcome to Legal Off the Leash, the podcast where we take the legal profession out of the box and into a happier and more fulfilling future.
We're your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth de Stadler. On today's episode, we're talking to Jonathan Peddie, former partner at Baker McKenzie, who's written one of the most compelling articles I've read in a while on what he considers to be the profession's most dangerous obsession, profits per equity partner, or PEP. Jonathan was called to the bar in 1994 and practiced criminal law before a career in law firms and in-house. He spent 10 years at Clifford Chance as a litigation and regulatory lawyer, and then as Deputy General Counsel handling the firm's professional indemnity risk. He joined Barclays Bank in 2005 and became Managing Director of Litigation, Investigations and Enforcement, and led that team through the global financial crisis and in the aftermath, which saw huge enforcement and prosecution pressure on the banking sector and Barclays in particular. In 2014, he established the bank's specialist financial crime legal team. He spent the past 10 years at the law firm Baker McKenzie, where for 5 years he chaired its financial institutions global industry group. Jonathan left Baker McKenzie at the end of June this year and is due to take up a new role in September. Jonathan, welcome to Legal Off the Leash.
Thank you very much. That reads a little bit like my obituary, which I hope doesn't get printed in that form, but it was good to hear my history back. Most of it's true.
Why? Have you had any death rates?
Not yet, but you don't count your chickens, do you?
So Jonathan, I read your article just over a week ago. At the time of recording this, it's been just over a week since you released it. And immediately I contacted Elizabeth to say, we need to get you on the show to talk about this. So now my first thought was, as I was reading this, it reminded me of that first scene of Jerry Maguire. You've written this kind of almost treatise. He wrote what was called a manifesto, but it kind of felt like this huge thing that you'd written that goes out the norms of what's discussed by partners, that I could see almost colleagues cheering you on as you went into the office. And then as you kind of walked past them, they'd be whispering that you wouldn't even make it to the end of the day. So when I then looked at your profile, I was actually almost pleased that you were no longer a partner in a law firm when you decided to write this. But before we go into the article itself, we've just got to ask this first question. What motivated you to write it?
So a little bit of a spoiler. This has been on the boil for a long time. So I started penning this about 18 months ago, really for my own benefit. In a leadership role in a big law firm, you ask yourself, are we doing the right thing? And when you're a partner, you have a voice in the leadership of the organization. And I personally was a challenging voice. So I would raise issues. I would bring in my experience from outside. Most law firm partners have not got a background in industry outside law firms. Most law firm partners are homegrown, or at least have lived in the law firm world. So they're looking through one set of lenses. They're thinking, well, this is how we've always done it, so let's just carry on doing it and do it even better. And I think when you have that objectivity, you start to ask, well, can I bring this to the attention of people making decisions? Or if you're the decision maker, what do I know that I can bring to bear to make a difference? And sometimes for me, I have to write that down and think it through and challenge myself and work out what's right and wrong, what won't fly. And so I wrote it as an article really for circulation amongst colleagues to ask whether we were missing something and to bring in a different perspective. And as I built it, I started to understand what it was that I was thinking about, which is, what does sustainability in business actually mean? So in other words, if we've got a proxy for measuring our capability, and this is not specific to the firm I worked in, it's true of all of the big firms. If we've got a proxy for measuring it, is that causing us an unseen problem? What's coming down the track? What's ahead? If we carry on and go full fat, all in on this, what will the consequences be? And so that was the purpose of it, to just try and get some written advocacy down to enable me to speak up for some of the principles that are in there. And you'll have seen there's a whole load of principles around diversity of the team, beyond the lawyers, around the implications from a client buying point of view, around other measures of performance that are silenced by over-obsession with profits per equity partner. All of those things, I was just bringing them into one place and seeing whether I could put together a strong argument to say something else ought to be the principle for measurement. So it's really a provocative document to provoke my own thoughts, and then I sat on it. And then I thought, right, well, the time to post this is when you're not working for a law firm and you're not going to upset anybody directly or breach anything. You can just do as you please.
You're a bit of a rebel, in other words, or a guerrilla.
I don't think I'm a rebel. I think I'm a speaker of truths, and that obviously has political consequences. Yeah. There were times where, in my own experience in big partner meetings on firm strategy, I would say to leadership, this firm does not understand the cost to achieve concept, the responsibility of investment. So I would speak truth to power, and I'll leave it to other people to decide whether that was a good idea.
So we've called it profits per equity partner, referred to it as PEP throughout the rest of this. But for those lawyers who aren't in those positions to really truly understand what that is, what exactly is PEP, and why is it that you think it's kind of like become the holy grail for law firm partners?
Yeah, all through my career, which has been quite a lengthy one, PEP has been a phrase that journalists have been happy to pick up quickly because it's a standardized or near standardized measure that creates a unitary measurement of a firm's performance. So it's profit made by the firm divided by the number of equity partners, which is already a problem because obviously the firm is made up of equity partners, non-equity partners, the salary partners, and then many other employees. So it's a skinny measure, but what it's used largely for is a means of accounting for the performance of your firm as against other firms. So it's a very short-term method of comparing one with another. And PEP is used by lawyers deciding where to go next, but it's also much more heavily used by law firms to advertise how successful they are against each other for recruitment and publicity purposes. So you will see, for example, amongst US law firms, the AmLaw 50, which is the top 50 performing firms, that is profits per equity partner. So if you're top 10 in the AmLaw 50, you're the top 10 most profitable firm divided by your equity partners. Now, purpose of my paper was to critique that very narrow measure and say there are problems with that. I think everybody understands there are problems with it, but not many people have gone to the lengths of explaining how it gets to be problematic and where it goes from there.
Has it struck anybody how ironic that acronym is? Because we call it PEP, and I'm familiar with PEP Talks, which is supposed to be something that motivates people, that gets them excited to do their jobs. And I think that this, if I understand you correctly, that this measure of PEP is actually doing the opposite, that it's demotivating employees or even affecting their health and well-being.
Well, I think that it's important I say it can be. So yeah. I'm sure there are many firms where profits per equity partner are high, the culture is good, and the performance is great, and they're all very motivated and excited about that and feel very well about it. What I've looked at is the risk, the downside risk of using that as your only measure and how it excludes other things. So, I mean, the gist of my paper is really it excludes investment in area. It motivates non-investment in areas which I consider to be important for growth of a proposition that a client will want to buy at the price that you sell it. That's the most important message. And by that, I don't just mean the people, but I mean the quality of service and the breadth of capability and the state of readiness that you have as an organization to deal with whatever complex issues your top clients need or any of your clients need. And then in terms of growing your organization, the investment in the people who will help the lawyers get there, because you cannot run a law firm with just a whole load of lawyers doing the non-legal stuff off the side of their desks. That's one of the points that appears to have got a huge amount of attention in terms of people's enjoyment of the paper. My cynical view is that's just because that's in the early few pages, and those who've read it have sort of given up halfway through, so they've taken the first point. But I'll leave that to others to decide.
I mean, when I tell people that 20 years ago, when I worked for a large commercial firm, large by South African standards, we had no HR department. There was no one looking after human resources at all. And I think for an organization of that size, it's unheard of.
At the beginning, I talked about my experience outside private practice in listed company roles, and the expectations, the governance expectations on listed companies, particularly in my experience in the financial services sector, which is highly regulated, the expectations of how seriously you will take your control environment, which is what the financial institutions world calls compliance, legal, risk, and audit. Legal is only one of those elements, and the expectation is that you will not cut corners and you will fully supply the best people doing their best work in these areas. And then I would add to that, the expectation is that HR will be strong. Finance obviously needs to be exceptionally strong in order to meet the governance expectations. And lawyers constantly give advice to that effect of how it is very important for their clients, whether listed or not, whether regulated or not, to have strong control environments. And yet it is quite common to see law firms deciding that it's okay for them to cut corners and cut costs in these areas. So they don't take their own advice.
So that was where you opened your article, was about these other areas that are considered cost centers because, they aren't part of the production side of the business, which is the lawyers. And it was an incredibly strong opening, I felt, because when you're talking about all of those areas, you wrote about the fact that in all of these places, HR, marketing, BD, everywhere else around the business, that are referred to as non-lawyers, but they are business teams, they're operations team members. And you mentioned that in a hospital, you don't call them doctors and non-doctors. That was a beautiful analogy as well. But your article will resonate, that beginning will resonate with both business team members who will say, yeah, do you know what? What happens is that we get cut right back. We're the first to go in a downturn, and then it's slow to pick up when things get better. And then we are worked really, really hard without having the proper resources because we are just seen as a cost center. We're not seen as a contributor to the success of the business. And then on the other side, you get lawyers going, well, we don't get enough support from those operational sides of the business. So you get it from both sides, and you don't get the success that you're looking for from any side of the business. We've all worked in law firms, and we've all seen this. I've always said that I believe, as much as what you've written is the case, is that lawyers are trained to do the work that's put in front of them. We're not taught that law is a business. We are taught that law is a profession. And the one thing we're taught at university, in law school, and in practice is do that work. Do the work that's put in front of you. And the more of that you do, the higher up the ladder you're going to go. And then it's only when you hit partnership and the partners go, okay, well, now you're going to have your own profit and loss. We're expecting you to go out and win work. Do you think that kind of mindset, that kind of thinking, that lack of understanding that law is a business contributes to this problem as well?
It's good to meet someone else who does this, who wraps a million things in a question. There's a lot of stuff in there. Can I just sort of back up a bit and say, I think partners in law firms understand that law is a business. It's a professional business. So it's not either a business or a profession. It's a profession that is intent on making money from legal advice. Okay, so I think people understand the difficulties and the compromises very well. I think there is an embedded problem in perception about the importance of lawyers versus the importance of other people in the business. And I don't see this in industry. So in my in-house days, I did not see, when you're sitting around a table with finance, HR, compliance, audit, business leads, lawyers, I didn't see a sense that the lawyers felt that they were the most important people in the room and the business revolved around them, because it did not revolve around them. Now, the difference between that and a law firm is that in a law firm, the partners and the associates are, they think, the business. My point is no, The whole business is the business, of which the lawyers are the lawyers, okay? And yes, of course, producers, as I've called it in the note, producers are critical. They are the makers of units of costed time that are sold to clients. But the marketing of them, the management of them, employee relations, the HR, the finance, the doing of all of the things that are not legal services are critical to optimizing them. And you do have this strange situation, which is broken a long time ago and stayed broken, where lawyers say, well, this investment is quite a large cost and it's not delivering the quality that I want. So I don't mind if that cost is cut and they are stretched, because it's not like if I maintain that investment, I am getting great service. Well, that misses the point that the service is de-optimized because some years back, the decision was made not to optimize that investment. So this is a paper about investment. This is a paper about where you put your money. And what I'm actually saying is PEP is a measure of profitability. The other two measures, well, there are many variables in the equation. The other two elements worth looking at are demand, so what your client's decisions are about whether they should instruct you, and revenue. Now, revenue is a more honest measure, and demand is a more honest measure than PEP, because PEP tells the reader more about what the business has chosen to do with its cost management, how it treats its revenue, than perhaps how healthy the business actually is and how sustainable the business is. And I'll just try and give an example. You could have flat demand or even reducing demand. And I haven't really developed this in the paper because it would have then been unbelievably long. But you can have flat demand where clients are thinking, yeah, well, we'll stay with that firm, but we're not going to increase the amount we instruct them. Or we're going off that firm and we're going to reduce the amount we're going to give them. You can have demand flat or reducing, and you can cut costs aggressively, and you can put your hourly rate up, and your PEP can go up. So the headline can be that you're in a year-on-year improving firm, but the background is that clients are wanting to instruct you less. Now, that's why I say PEP is not a good measure of law firm health. It may be a good spot measure of law firm performance between partners, but it says nothing about how the firm is being run.
Earlier on, you said if you were creating a law firm today, you wouldn't build a law firm this way. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, and look, this is a doctrinal point rather than anything that I can put down on paper in sort of persuasive scientific terms. I think you either get this or you think it's madness, and hence the division of views that exists in response to my paper. But you either think the development of people and the inclusion of people who are not lawyers is critically important to the health and success of your firm, or you don't. And I'm going to use an analogy. For the last 10 years, I've been in a law firm, and every partner will know that I have banged on about personal development, coaching, and feedback and the training of young lawyers. I happen to think, having worked in-house where we had a fixed budget, not very well paid individuals, and we had to get quality up and performance and motivation up and be fit for developing a department of 9 people into a global function of 135 dealing with a global financial crisis. So from a sort of stable bank to one in crisis. The answer to that is improve what you've got. You're not going to be able to go out and hire lots more people in those circumstances. So improve what you've got. How do you do that? Well, you remind them why they became lawyers. You put them back in touch with what they're really good at, what they like to do and are good at, and you develop that. That requires a rare skill because it requires a lawyer to be actually interested in another lawyer. And you have to actually want to know what motivates people. And you have to then give time, which makes no money at all in the immediate term, to developing and coaching and understanding and exploring and giving feedback and telling them what's not going well and telling them what's good and building their capabilities so that a lawyer becomes a plus lawyer. Okay. Now, why I've mentioned that is you go into a law firm and you say that, and they go, yeah, agreed. And then they don't know how to do it because there is very limited investment. And I don't mean money taken out of the pocket and paid across. What I actually mean is investment of time in the doing of that. Now, anyone who works in a large law firm knows that one-to-ones get cancelled, meetings are poorly managed, As I once said about another law firm, the entire purpose of an annual appraisal appears not to develop the person, but carefully to erect the barricade between that person and partnership by discussing things that haven't gone right. And that's not personal development. That's misuse of the process. What you need to do is get really into developing people. Now, what that requires is producers need to sacrifice units of costed time, fee income, fee earning time, to invest that time in the people around them. What does that develop? Better lawyers, loyal lawyers, motivated learning lawyers, and people who will be able to earn more. Final point on this, I talked a lot earlier in my career about how I could do a lot of work at my desk and earn a lot of money, or I could lead 500 people who could increase their fee earning capability. And the amount net that they would make for the firm would be far beyond any amount of increased hours I could put in, because you'd factorize high performance. Okay. And that's what I thought leadership was. Okay. So I'm very keen on sacrificing those fee earning hours to invest in the development of people. And when I say development of people, I'm not just talking about lawyers. I'm also talking, because we talked about this earlier, about people who provide services to the firm to help it be strong. So develop the BD person, develop the HR person, mentor the person in the general counsel's office, or whatever it is that helps the organization be better than it was. Law firms should be open to the idea that lawyers should sacrifice time that they might be spending fee earning to optimize their business, but they won't do it. They'll do it because they have to, not because they want to. And that's a fundamental problem with the law firm model, because the expectation of hours is such that it is really dangerous to spend your time developing others when you could just knock out the widgets.
There's this fantastic book that I read a while ago called 4,000 Weeks. And the premise or the fact behind the book is that the average human life consists of 4,000 weeks. And there's an entire page and a half devoted to what he calls the very special case of the commercial lawyer. And I think this is sort of the point that you are making, is that if you commoditize time, anything that you use your time for that's not billable will seem to you as be inferior time. And that could be, like you are saying, career development, business development, or those kinds of non-billable sort of areas in which lawyers should also focus, but also family time, right? So when you take an hour off to go to a child's recital, you feel like you shouldn't be doing it.
I wouldn't limit it to that. Obviously, we're all aware of the dangers of slogging away at a professional life and not being fit. So, for example, an hour of exercise in the morning is great. What one of my coaches who coached me used to say, the golden hour in the day where you don't read emails and you plan your day to get your priorities right. Critically important to optimizing your own performance. But you're quite right that there is this prejudice that needs to be broken down, which is a billable hour is a superior hour to an hour spent doing anything else. And that's wrong. And I'll tell you simply why it's wrong. Because if I spend no time developing the young lawyers who work with me, what do I get? I get an organization that only I can lead, that will have no inheritors, that progressively gets less capable and less attractive to my clients, and where I'm stuck doing the law work because I haven't developed people to a standard where they can take my place. If I spend my time developing the quality of those around me, we can hunt more widely in greater numbers, and we can increase our client loyalty, and we can increase the quality of what we do. People who will come along who are better than me. It's not as getting someone as good as you. It's actually developing someone so that they smash it. What you're trying to do is run a business that you hand over to people who will do even better than you did. That's what you're trying to do. If you don't invest in the time to make those people learn, you're actually killing the business rather than building the business. And look, I say that because all through my career, I've had the benefit of people leading me well and giving their time to me. I've also extracted it from them, whether they wanted it or not. I've stood on their shoulders. I've been really demanding, but I've also paid that back. And I know that I spend more time than your average lawyer working on the development of those around me. I know because feedback in my world is 360. So I hear it. I have colleagues and friends who are in general counsel roles across the market, who were young lawyers when I first worked with them. And they speak of the fact that I was focusing on what made them tick, not what makes a lawyer tick, or how we run our business, or how to be more profitable, but how do I make you enjoy your job more, and how do I make you better at what you do, and what do you get wrong, and how can we develop you, and how can we optimize you? And if you do that, the net effect is that all of you, if you're running a law firm, all of those people will be much higher productivity and much more lean and efficient and effective and much more attractive to the client. The profits will look after themselves.
There's this beautiful passage in the article, one of many, I should say, but there's a brilliant passage in there where you talk about the fact that what PEP does is it makes you work year to year and it makes you look backwards at what did work, and then that becomes the strategy for the next year, and things just fall by the wayside because of it. So there's no real change management. There's nothing like that. Can you talk about that as well? Because it's just so brilliant.
I will. That passage, I was talking about the difference between vision and strategy and execution, which is really a hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy lies your mission, what you're on the earth for. Your vision is how you want to improve what you're doing. And then your strategy is how you're going to get there. And then your execution is what you're going to do to deliver your strategy. So that's the hierarchy. Law firms traditionally struggle with this, and you put your finger on it. What I was saying is, it's a very big distraction if you dissipate your profits every year. If you give everybody the money that the firm has made year on year, but you purport to have a 5 or 10-year strategy, then there are seriously distracting events in terms of where the money comes from that makes people think, well, that strategy is a bit rigid, or that strategy is a bit off. Why are we investing in, say, competition lawyers if they're not making much money at the moment, or litigation or transactional? Because look, it's all coming from there. That's how rich we got last year. And the voice amongst partners of how the money is made is a louder one than the voice about how the money should be made. Actual execution trumps strategy and vision. And I'm going to extend this a bit. In a law firm, that hierarchy is reversed, where what you're doing at the moment is what you're all about. Okay, so execution is the biggie, what clients are asking you to do and how well you're doing it and what money you're making out of it. And the proof of the pudding is in the eating, which is how much money you then make in the organization, the profits. And those profits are a product of that revenue minus your costs. So if you want to do even better, you can control costs a bit more aggressively. And so you can manage rates up and overheads down, the net of which is that profits look great. But everybody's lost at that point what you are trying to achieve or what you're trying to become. So vision and strategy become subordinate to execution. And that's the danger of the business model, because it's all about where the money comes from. And that justifies current state of investment. So for example, if you have a large technology investment, which is going to create a client management system or a conflict system or improved communications or whatever technology spend you're on, people will begrudge that because that is a significant cost. And they'll talk more about where the money is coming from and how to protect that profit by reducing costs. They will not be looking at where this will get the firm in order to perform better in future. Of course, people will be talking about that. It will be in discussion. But the brutal truth is that what went into your bank account this year is really the hottest piece of news. And that will determine how you choose to run the firm next year.
It just strikes me that this entire conversation is actually about these perverse incentives, right? So we're saying that everybody's incentivized not to look at things that actually advance the strategy or values of the organization. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that is the culmination of the paper, because what I'm saying is, what are you incentivizing, whether on purpose or accidentally? And I've drawn a version of the future which says if you get too excited about profits only and you fail to invest, or you create a situation where that in which you invest is not actually that good because you're not giving it that much attention and you're not really embracing the cost to achieve optimum business performance, well, then what you're doing is you're reinforcing the sense that it's all about profit. And if you reinforce the sense that it's all about profit, and I'm not suggesting that businesses should not be about profit, what I'm saying is profit to the exclusion of other considerations, then you create a business that has some problems because it becomes unattractive to the very source of that income. It becomes unattractive to the client. Okay, it becomes unclear to the client as to what it is because that strategic statement about what you're achieving, what you're there for, and what you're trying to become isn't there. People can't articulate it clearly because there's not a consensus amongst partners or owners of the business. There isn't clarity in where your strengths and weaknesses lie or what services you actually offer and where you're best in the market and where you're not. There becomes an aggressive sell everything mentality, and there becomes a slightly indiscriminate view as to where you should be making your money from and how you should do it. Because what you're teaching your business owners to do is to compete with themselves. What you're doing is you're saying partners should go out and get work at all costs, wherever it is, whatever it is, step over the awkwardness of how they should describe themselves or limit themselves in terms of the service they offer. Perhaps take a different view of client relationships and say there are no owners of clients, there are no people with special relationships. The firm is a bunch of individuals who can chase whatever they want. And what you create is a confusing message to the market, but you also chase work that you're not best suited for because it's not in your interest to leave it to somebody else. You don't say, well, I tell you what, I'm going to pass on this pitch because Fred or Jane are better. That's knocking your own numbers down. Why would you do that? So you go for it. Okay, now these are extreme examples, and it's not like that in every law firm. I'm not suggesting it's at all clear, but these are the incentives that change people's approach to how they chase work, which doesn't serve clients with the best lawyers. So we started this conversation with, is it a profession or a business? It's a profession where you're running a business out of providing those professional services, but they're professional services. So the client pays a lot of money for what should be the best services. Okay, and in big firms, you need really careful attention to how you remunerate partners to ensure that they are incentivized to ensure that the best lawyers are available to the clients for that particular service. And if you create a situation where they're chasing filling their own pockets individually rather than keeping a handle on quality, standards and strategic development of the firm, you're in danger.
You just talked about the fact that you go chasing work that you aren't right for. And you talk about in the article, this Hunger Games approach that is taken in firms. One of the really interesting things when you talk about investment in the future is that what is coming down that track is that as partners leave that have got relationships with decision makers in business, what comes up behind them are more junior lawyers and junior partners who don't have those relationships, who don't have that trust with those decision makers. And what it leads to is a complete change in the dynamic of those relationships. It creates a complete change in the type of work that is going to come the way of those lawyers and that law firm in the future.
Yeah, I thought that was my better point in the whole article, and you're the only person who spotted that. Other people are more interested in how we shouldn't sack BD people and so forth. I think this is the biggie because Barclays, we divided our workload for our panels into gold, silver and bronze. Gold was bet the bank, cost not an issue, get it right. Top firm instruction once every 10 years or 5 years or something. The large scale prosecution of Barclays and its executives in relation to the Qatari investment was an example of a gold instruction. Okay, you're going to take it seriously, get the best possible lawyers on it, and whatever it costs, you would do that. Silver was high value, significant workload, of which there was quite a flow, but cost was sensitive given the value of each one. So there were panel rates and so forth, and we were quite careful about it. Bronze was volume, repeat, cost managed, low value, high volume work like mortgage recoveries, that sort of thing. Now, generally, firms might do bronze and silver they just stretch up to silver, and they'd carry some bronze, or they do silver and hope to get a gold instruction. Very few firms would run themselves capable of doing a gold instruction and a bronze. Okay, you wouldn't do volume and bet the organization. Now that's turned out to be about right in terms of the next 20 years, in terms of how the market has approached bidding for work. Okay, you've got the volume service providers, you've got the elite, and you've got the mid-market. The mid-market will do some volume. The mid-market wants to graduate up into the gold work, and that's where the competition has been. Top middle has wanted to price itself a little cheaper than the Magic Circle and White Shoe, but still be as good. And we've seen that develop, okay? Now, in order to maintain access to gold and top-end silver work, you've got to please quite a lot of parts of the client. It's not just the head of litigation or the head of M&A who you need to please, who feeds you. But to get a bet the bank or bet the organization instruction, or to be regarded as trustworthy with all of the silver, top-end silver work, you need to satisfy the expectations of the executive and the management and perhaps even the board. And then there are some instructions at the gold level which the panel firms will never see, because the board will decide that that really needs to go to X firm or Y firm, because that is their comfort blanket in a crisis. And to be the firm or the lawyer who that board member, that head of the board audit committee or the chairman will turn to and say, Jonathan, this is a problem. What do we do? You need to have senior, trusted, experienced individuals who are prepared to say what they think, engage robustly with that top-end decision-making group, who won't get trampled on by these super strong alpha types. One of the problems with cost management and PEP focus is that those relationships live with people who spent a career developing them. Certainly the second half of their career. However, a lot of profit comes from reducing that equity and concentrating on your producers being at the salaried partner, associate, and junior equity partner stage. So if you run a highly profitable business by paring back your equity, fine, that will look good. But what will happen? You'll lose access to that top-end work, and then you'll be fighting over the silver or even the bronze if things go from worse to worse still. Is that what you were building? What did your strategy say? Well, you didn't really articulate your strategy. You just said chase PEP. Okay, well, was your strategy to cash down in quality of work or to cash up? Well, what were you doing with your rates? You put your rates up in order to improve PEP because demand wasn't that good and you weren't really managing costs in the way you needed to, but you were paring your costs back a little bit. So you were able to improve PEP. PEP looked good. But unfortunately, slowly, bit by bit, you're incentivizing people to concentrate less on the development of the quality of your lawyers. You weren't doing feedback, appraisal. You weren't investing on coaching. You weren't sending people on business courses. You weren't doing any of that, and you weren't giving them much support. What you were saying is make lots of money. And when you did that, you also reduced the access to the board. So what you're saying now is to that bunch of lawyers who inherit the business, make lots of money out of this, but unfortunately the client will not look to you for the most remunerative and most profitable work. You'll be fighting against the mid-market, but you'll have priced yourself very high. So you've got a choice. Either you miss out on work because you lose pitches on price, or you discount and that affects PEP. So even your PEP strategy isn't working. If you do discount, obviously your PEP's going down. You might buy increased demand from that, but it'll be demand for silver work, which wasn't your plan. You didn't want that. But that's the danger of not articulating a strategy that runs, say, 3, 5, 10 years. That's the danger of execution being your determiner of how you perform.
So then let's talk about what the alternative is. If PEP is so toxic and we know it goes against the idea of strategy, what should firms be measuring instead?
So my message is not don't measure PEP. My message is not don't have a look at your PEP. My message is not don't talk to prospective hires by reference to PEP. That's clearly a motivator. Profits per partner is a motivator for a lot of people because it is a proxy and it shows how the firm is performing in certain ways. But what I'm saying is it's showing one measure, and therefore it is not a true reflection and shouldn't be relied on for any serious decisions. Merger decisions, whether you hire or you go to a large firm, you shouldn't make that decision just on PEP. I'm not saying it's irrelevant. I'm saying it's not enough alone. So revenue, obviously, which skins back the question of it's an income measure that puts aside how you run the business. That's quite telling. Demand, that's another thing. And then if we're talking about PEP over time, performance, the direction of the line on the graph, what is actually happening over the period that there should be a 5 to 10 year strategy. And so how does that compare with the strategy that the firm says it has, the best fit line on the graph? But also layers below, which is where is the firm making its money and how? So one of the things I did a lot of was have a look at the truth of how the firm that I was working in made its money. And I'm not in a position to give away secrets here, but simple measures such as how profitable a client was not enough, in my view, to tell us anything. We had 78 offices. So I said, right, I want to know what the average deal size or the average instruction is. And the reason for that is because in 78 offices, if you have a £10 million account with a client, that might look really good. But if it's spread over 78 offices and no one deal or piece of litigation is worth more than a few £1,000s, well, that's a completely different story because the client will regard you as a rounding error. If it's a large international bank that spends over £1 billion on legal services and they only spend 10 million on you, then they're more likely to go to one of their other panel firms and say, right, well, you get 100 million off us. So would you mind picking up this £10 million of work and just doing it for free as a discount on top of the 100 million that you already get for us, or low price? We'll just chuck it in and increase the discount. So your danger is that you become a rounding error for a client if your work is not significant enough. I always use this analogy, which is that, is it on the board report? And you say that to law firm partners and they don't understand exactly what you mean. But every large client is going to have a board risk report that contains their most toxic matters. So in my world of litigation and enforcement, I would expect a meaningful matter to be on the board risk report. Okay, and that puts it in the silver gold space, not the bronze. If it's on the board report, it matters. They're going to care how it's done and they're going to pay a lot for it. And they're going to want the best law firm and the best lawyers to advise them. Is it on the board report or not? Or are you making £10 million out of hundreds and hundreds of small token matters that don't mean anything to anyone really, individually, in-house? It's just a commoditized volume of work. What is for you a large account is that actually a series of bronze instructions, just hundreds and hundreds. So the better proxies are how many matters does your client revenue actually account for? So what is the average size of a matter? How many matters? Is there a sweet spot? Yes, there is. If you're only doing 2 or 3 matters for a client a year, then clearly you're not going to blip their radar enough. If you're doing 2,000, they're probably debt repossessions and they're not going to blip their radar for different reasons. There's a middle ground here where the value of each deal is big enough to excite them to make sure that it's done well enough. And there are enough of them for you to be in their face all the time. That's a good client relationship and that's profitable.
Yeah, it's when you are at their strategic table. It's when they consider you part of their...
Correct. So you're part of their belief system. And those are close, trusted client relationships that every firm says they're chasing. But are you? And are you making it more possible to chase those or less? Are you creating a situation where you're selling the best? Or are you motivating lawyers to offer something that is not as good as it should be? Are you effectively trading your way out of access to that sweet spot? That's what my paper's about. Be careful if the obsession with how you run your own business becomes the way you do business, because then you've stopped thinking about the client and you're going to trade your way out of their mind.
And that quote will definitely be extracted from the podcast.
Yeah,
I think that's such a nice summary of what you're talking about.
You've received a lot of feedback on this. How's that gone?
So it's been really interesting. I put it on LinkedIn because I do tend to gather my thoughts by writing them down. because they get a bit more rigorous and they get a bit more persuasive. That's just my professional training. And so, I tinker with it. So when I've got something, I'll launch it. But what you're doing on LinkedIn is you're launching it largely to a little echo chamber of your own chosen contacts. So you're likely to get a warm reception. I know that there'll be law firm partners who choose not to respond because they don't necessarily want to be seen to make criticism. Although it's not that critical, it's just provocative. There's been a lot of people who said, yeah, that's exactly it. Some of my former partners who've said great things. I mean, I call out Mark Taylor, who is a US partner who very quickly responded saying yes. And there's a whole load of other variables that are very important to the quality of a law firm. And so he said it just right. And I strongly agree with that. However, there's also a sort of journalistic following where they've picked up headlines and bits and probably haven't read it all. And that bit that they have read, they've made a big song and dance out of. And so it's been in City AM and some legal websites. And that is a less friendly world because they don't know me. They're not my chosen contacts. And maybe it's more honest, but there's been a lot of, here's an old guy who's made a load of money being a lawyer in a law firm and now he's left and now he's criticizing it. He seems to have overlooked the fact that he's made a lot of income out of it. Whether I have or I haven't, I'm still entitled to express views as to the health of the structure. And I care about it because I care about the colleagues that I've worked with and who come next to inherit that sector. And the sector is ripe for change. It's been ripe for change all through my career, and the change rate has been slow. So anything I can do to provoke discussion about it is a good thing. Others have said there's nothing new in this, and it's the same old, same old. I think those are the people who haven't properly read it, because there is stuff in here that is, if not brand new as an idea, it's at least novel to have it all in one place and expressed to some degree logically with an expression of how you think it ends if you don't get it right. And I don't think I've seen an article that has addressed that. And that's why I wrote it.
Yeah, I've not read anything like this. You had discussions about this and had various different elements, but nothing like this that brings it all together, that is incredibly thorough and so thoughtful.
It's kind of you to say that. I mean, people say I am thoughtful. And what I don't like the idea of is spending 30 years or more being a lawyer and coming out of it with no improved thoughts than you went in with, because that is a waste of 3 decades, right? So you should be sitting consciously thinking, what am I doing here? What am I creating? What are the consequences of this? How would we do better? Is this good for the society I live in? Is it good for the people I work with? Am I being a decent person? All of these thoughts should be running through your head. It is your responsibility. It is a profession, as we keep saying, it's a profession. But also, just in terms of human endeavour, when you finally drop off the perch, you would hope that you'd have done something that might have changed something, however big or small, just at least expressed a view on how things might be done differently, so that those doing it ahead can either take advantage of mistakes you made so that they don't have to make them, or even better than that, you actually might create a dialogue that causes change. And that's the goal.
Well, I think you succeeded in doing just that.
Well, between the three of us.
Gave me a lot of, it's not nothing. I mean,
Yes.
I think Scott's right. It's a very cohesive piece of work. Like, we've seen people write about some of the things that you talk about as individual topics, but not how they hang together, if I could put it like that.
Yeah, I'm a systems guy. For me, it is about the whole. If I criticize PEP being a driver for business measurement and say it's totally outrageous to leave other things out, well, then I shouldn't either. So I should talk about the importance of personal development, the importance of other parts of the business. Otherwise, I'm making the same mistake. I'm just making a slightly different one by saying something else is important to the exclusion of that. That can't be right. So for me, it's all about what are you running? What's the ecosystem? And are you attending to all parts of that? And look, I've said this before, but what I'm talking about in this article is true sustainability. Can you grow your business sustainably to have the best people and to perform the best and to look after your clients in the best way? How do you do that?
So at the end of each session, we ask all of our guests 4 questions. And the goal of these questions is to look at the legal industry as it is now and how we think it could be, but also to give some practical insights into how people can apply what they learned from this episode to design's ideal career in law. Okay, so the first one. What advice would you give a lawyer just starting out in the profession?
2 pieces of advice on that one. The first is don't measure it based on day-to-day experience. You've joined a profession and it's going to take decades to fully reconcile yourself with all of the upsides and downsides. And so therefore take a very long view and don't ask yourself whether it would be better to be working in McDonald's on a pounds per hour basis, because you might conclude that it will be, and that would be a damaging conclusion. So concentrate on gaining for the long term. And that means learning off people, enjoying the experiences that you're having, keep the variety up, wide as possible. And then the second thing, which I think I've alluded to before, is concentrate on personal development. Get the gain out of other people's journeys. So when they've been through stuff, learn from them. If, unfortunately, as I've said, the law firm model is such that people don't really engage enough in personal development and coaching, then demand it. Just go and get it off people.
Don't be afraid to bother people.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's why it's called training, isn't it? The experience that you can get in throughout this profession is incredible, not to take advantage of it. So what's one thing about the legal profession you wish would change, and how do you think that change could happen?
So I think it's the sort of headline in the paper, which is lawyers have got to stop thinking of themselves as the be-all and end-all of it. And they've got to understand that they might have a great skill, but it's only going to be optimized if they attach it to other great skills. So my wish is that we achieved proper plurality of skills. I would love to see a law firm where a non-lawyer is a partner. This notion that you create a situation where your best non-legal service providers, the support world, as they call it, the best you can offer them is a director role, and that they come alongside. I would love to see a situation in which a law firm is made up of owners who comprise lawyers and, dare I use that horrible phrase, non-lawyers. It would entirely change the dialogue.
So what is the one myth around success in the legal profession that you think needs to be debunked?
I really struggled with this one. I don't think there are a lot of myths in the legal world. I think there are a lot of people looking away from truths and facts. So I'm going to slightly dodge the question and say the law firm model allows people to not attend to certain aspects of professional responsibility and business leadership, all in the name of the billable hour. So the billable hour has a greater right to your time than other considerations. I would like people to stop thinking about that. And, critics will say, well, Jonathan, then my organization makes less money. I dispute that. I strongly dispute that. Organizations may make a slightly smaller revenue in terms of how many units of costed time they sell. Might do, not necessarily will do, but might do. But profitability is a more complex issue, and the quality of work that comes from optimizing your organization with the best people, lawyers and people who are not lawyers, so that clients get what they need and get it consistently and permanently available from the best people, done in the best way. Well, that makes proper money, and that's profitable.
Excellent response. What would it look like if you could design the ideal legal career path?
I fought to try and have that. So my career has been quite twitchy. I've had long periods of time concentrating on doing well in the places that I've tried to be at, but I've been really, really impatient to experience different things. So I was at the bar, I wanted to be in a law firm. I was in a law firm, I wanted to be in-house. I was in-house, I wanted to be a partner in a law firm, and I wasn't a partner in a law firm before I was 47. I left it quite late. And now I have some other plans. For me, this notion of coming and going from different cultural environments and bringing the benefit of it into your next step is unbelievably valuable. It's been hugely valuable to me. It's also been a massive frustration because sometimes you arrive in an organization speaking language that they don't understand, and you're like a traveler from outer space, and you think that everyone understands and they all think you're a bit weird. So the cultural adjustment is quite a challenge. But then you have a superpower. You have knowledge from the client, or knowledge from another firm, or knowledge from another industry. And that's hugely valuable. And so I would say that people should want to or even, dare I say it, should be obliged to come and go from the client and legal services side to move in and out. All of the lawyers who came on secondment to my team at Barclays and other teams at Barclays who have become partners in law firms are better partners than they otherwise would have been.
Right. So before we say goodbye, Jonathan, I just wanted to say that we are going to include a link to your article in the show notes, as well as, when we post about this episode, which I'm already excited about. How do people find you if they want to talk about the article, except for the people, obviously, who want to issue a death threat? They find
me on LinkedIn, I think, is the safest answer to that. I'm not going to give away my personal email or phone number or coordinates exactly. I've got some good engagement, and I'm actually responding to messages and challenges and engaging with people. There's probably more to come on that. So I give you that undertaking that if people want to get in touch through LinkedIn, I won't ignore it.
Yeah, you strike me as the kind of person who is intellectually humble and will listen to another point of view.
I don't know. If I was truly intellectually humble, I might not have written the article in the first place. So who knows? Who knows? That's not for me to decide.
Right. So a big thank you to Jonathan for coming on the show, talking about his article, The PEP Trap, the Evolving Law Firm Time Bomb, and sharing his thoughts on how it can be done better. We've been your hosts, Scott Simmons and Elizabeth de Stadler, and this has been Legal Off the Leash.